Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see such a lively crowd here tonight. It's my great honor to be the briefest of hostesses, and I get to hand things over to Oscald in just a moment. But I'm Meg Tyler, and I direct the poetry reading series here at CGS, and I'm just happy to see you and to hear these three wonderful writers read tonight. And here is Oscald.
Thanks, Meg. I am Oscald Melnichuk, and I am not experiencing any technical difficulties myself, but bear with us. So I'm the editor and publisher of Arrowsmith Press, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to what promises to be an astonishing reading. First, I want to thank Meg Tyler, Hajin, where's Hajin? Here, thank you, Annika, and the BU Creative Writing Program for inviting us here and co-sponsoring sponsoring the reception afterwards. I also want to thank the Creative Writing Program at my host institution, the University of Massachusetts, Boston, for the last many years providing us with such sterling editorial assistants who have helped to keep this project going. I want to thank especially this year's assistants, Scott Omond, Maya Geddes, for all the work in bringing us here together. I want to thank our assistant editor, Laura Stitzevich, for working so diligently with us over the last 4 years in keeping our social media project alive. Thank you also to Catherine Parnell for her tireless efforts to make sure that the books are noticed by appreciative readers everywhere. Thanks also to our fiction editor, John Fulton, who is in the audience, and to our new senior editor, Gerard, aka Jake Robertson, for making sure that all the pieces of our publishing puzzle fit together. Finally, I need to offer my profoundest gratitude to the man who turned these brilliant manuscripts into such handsome volumes, all of which are, of course, available for purchase. Our former senior editor, Ezra Fox, decided that after 5 years, the time had come to take up other challenges. I can't thank him enough for all that he's done on behalf of Arrowsmith, for the above and beyond generous, wise, and utterly professional work. Is Ezra here yet? Ezra? No, he promised he would be. Well, there you go. I'll also add that Arrowsmith is a modest operation, and it's fueled by the passion of all involved. And there's Ezra himself. Ezra, can we just give Ezra a round of applause? Timing, Ezra. Passion is its own reward, but it doesn't always cover overhead. So again, I know that a number of you wanted to buy books earlier, but if you could just renew that flame, rekindle that flame at the end of the reading, I'm sure you will be eager to. We invite you to pick them up in the back and see Jake about business end of this. Also tonight, for the first 30 buyers, you will receive a free copy of the Forshay Kaminsky anthology, In the Hour of War, an anthology of contemporary Ukrainian poetry written since the war began. So now to business. Quote, "What a superb poet she is, and what a range of original sensibility. What private music in the less well-worn emotions," writes Nadine Gordimer about Gjertrud Schnackenberg's poetry. And how many poets have you heard Nadine Gordimer say that about? Now, from one of the most lauded poets of her generation comes a major new work. Winner of the International Griffin Prize, the Rome Prize, the LA Times Books Prize, a Guggenheim and NEA, among many other awards. Gjertrud Schnackenberg has always put her technical mastery at the service of a sublime vision. In St. Matthew Passion, the poet recounts a speaker's experience of listening to Bach's masterwork and discovering in it a portal to another world. shimmering with mystery. The poet takes the reader with her on this symphonic journey, and we emerge enraptured, perhaps even transformed. Quote, I need a heart of bronze for hearing this, and not the lost wax melting off beneath a molten pour of sound, when, out of love, a solo flute appears. End quote. The result is a wholly thrilling work, deserving of a place alongside one of my personal favorites, T.S. Eliot's Ash Wednesday. I bring you Gjertrud Schnackenberg.
Okay. The St. Matthew Passion is Bach's telling in music the story of the last days and hours of the life of Jesus of Nazareth. The music of his Passion is made only of winds and strings and voices. There are no brass instruments, there are no drums, and this winds and strings instrumentation gives the Passion, the sound of the Passion, an extraordinary warmth, which together with the sound of the voices calling and calling from the beginning to the end, is a world unto itself. I'm going to read two poems about listening to two of the arias. First, a poem about listening to the aria of the violin in Erbarme dich, which means have mercy on me. And the second, about listening to the flute of Aus Liebe, which means out of love. These two arias are instrumentally the opposites of one another. Erbarme dich is all strings without winds, and Aus Liebe is all winds without strings. But both of these pieces are about the breathing of the instruments and the way the instruments of the Passion breathe is one of the several things that makes the instruments seem to be conscious. What I mean by breathing is, for example, the violin of Erbarme dich is trying to catch a breath, and the flute in Aus Liebe at the other end of the scale is trying to keep breathing and breathing and breathing with circular breathing, as if it's trying to keep itself from arriving at a last breath. Erbarme dich in the story is about the moment that Peter realizes at the bonfire outside the palace where Jesus is on trial in the middle of the night, that in order to save his own life, he has just denied 3 times that he even knows Jesus. And according to Matthew, when he realizes that he's done this, he leaves the bonfire, and Matthew says he went out and wept bitterly. And Bach embodies the sound of Peter's weeping by giving the violin repeated runs of rising triplets, da-da-da, da-da-da, which captures the rising sound of someone trying to catch a breath in the midst of sobbing, like, and it gives the aria a heart-stopping feeling. And in the second poem I'll read, listening to an aria for the solo flute. The flute uses circular breathing, as I said, to maintain a flow of breath without pausing, as if the flute wishes that breathing could never end. So the violin poem has an epigraph from a very mysterious poem by Rilke, which I'm using here to allude to the fact that Bach went blind after 2 cataract surgeries in the last year of his life in 1750. The epigraph is "Put out my eyes, and I can see you still." And the title of this poem is A Rising Minor Sixth. I try to pull away, but can't. My coat drawn halfway on and hanging crosswise in the back. The empty sleeve fallen aslant, brushing the floor. I have to leave. It's time. I've set the afternoon aside for taking care of things. My scribbled lists of valueless, inconsequential errands, rounds of chores, and unavailing tasks I can't put off. All things forgotten instantly as soon as taken care of, but haunting me if left undone. I have to leave. But when I try to make my hand reach for the door, it doesn't move, as if it isn't able to, as if I had forgotten you, Jerusalem, as if I could. Instead, I stand arrested at the door, held in abeyance by the music I left on. Ermormedy. A rising minor sixth unseals the sound. The violin, engulfed by what has happened, brings the room into another state of being, a seventh sense. Its aria, self-crucifying, brief, is trying to extend a wordless vocal line, as if the violin caught sight of bonfire-lit Jerusalem, a small midnight procession, roiling torches, shouted Greek, the sight of Jesus bound and shoved ahead, the sight of Peter trailing far behind, then halted in the dark because we cannot lift our feet or set them down again without the help of God. A sound as if the violin has seen nothing as sad in all of Israel, even with Jesus fallen on his knees. Nothing as sad in Israel as the sight of Peter from afar off, following. I sense the room behind me, holding still, engrossed, as if the room is listening, because the brushwork of the bow is given over to the darkest beauty that B minor ever touched, intent on finding, fastening F sharp to D, intensile gossamer, as if the heart's leap of a rising minor sixth could be enough to mend what's happened here. A leave-taking that no one would have wished for, wanted, willed. The passion's flutes, which shrilled with malice, taunting Peter at the bonfire in the palace courtyard, suddenly are stilled, gone dark, cut off, and lowered in the player's hands, because they've seen that he went out and wept most bitterly. Peter, who said an hour ago that he would die for him, but now, remembering the store that Jesus set in him, that valuing. Stock still and lowering my coat out of respect, because I'm standing in the presence of his wild tribulation, while the violin consents to shoulder this, to stay with him, to take it on as being all the violin can do. But what is worth the doing, given this? given that the tower Peter claimed that he would build has come to nothing but a scattering of massive half-cut blocks of stone abandoned on a quarry floor. Only enough for building half a tower. The other blocks he needs still hidden, uncut in the cliffs. Yet he can see that his Messiah has begun to climb a tower he built himself, to climb alone. The passion sound from balcony to balcony, from Thomaskirche to here. But if my love for you could only help, I have to leave. Instead, I stand stock still as if I'm physically unable not to hear it to the end, as if there's nothing I can do but stand and listen to a rising, falling in the treble clef, as if there's nothing left on earth for me to do but stand and listen, as if listening could help. And now the flute poem. Again, there aren't any strings underneath the flute here. There isn't any supporting harmonic structure. There's no bass continuo in this piece, and it gives the feeling that there's nowhere left to set foot, and that the earth has simply fallen away. The epigraph for this poem is from an online essay about the St. Matthew Passion by a member of the Bruderhof, whose name is Chris Zimmerman, who wrote about how the Passion music conveys to us that each of us must bear our part. I need a heart of bronze for hearing this, and not the lost wax melting off beneath a molten pour of sound when, out of love, a solo flute appears. Appears whether or not I've grown sick of the world, sick of the things that people do, sick of the ache. And in the end, what difference does it make that he has cast out every sickness, given what has happened, given this? Why summon from the air the oxygen that's needed for a last outflowing breath above a slowing pulse? And what can flutes accomplish? What do flutes have the ability to do? Why draw a breath not even deep enough for blowing out a candle flame that cleaves aus Liebe to the wick it carbonizes as it writhes? Why take repeated shallow sips of oxygen? And why array the fragile respirations of flutes expiring appoggiatura sighs against the sight of massive violence and abandonment at Golgotha? And why apply circular breathing to a frail lament that seems to breathe itself into existence for my joy and pleasure, while thou must suffer? Though it's true that lifted to the lips, Bach's flutes pursue the anguish to its source with tongue-assisted embouchure, the way a tongue will touch, draw back, then touch again a welling gap of sudden blood no gauze can stanch after an aching truth is torn out by the roots. I take a breath and move to turn the music off, but stop myself, relenting, giving up, because it's clear it doesn't matter whether I concede the miracle that flutes, for all their frailty, can overflow with truth when human beings are themselves incapable of saying it. The truth that each of us, however frail, must bear our part. the truth that he has held the lead weight of your heart, and weightless notes are capable of weighing it before they vanish off to go wherever music goes when nobody on earth is playing it.
Thank you, Trudy. I also meant to mention that at the end of the evening, we'll announce the Derek Walcott winner of the Derek Walcott Prize. This award is given to a book of poetry published by a poet from anywhere in the world, translated into English. And the judge for this year's award was Diane Mehta. So Jake will announce that at the end of the reading. So one of the most honored and respected essayists in this country, old friend, Sven Birkerts, recipient of awards from the National Book Critics Circle, the Lila Wallace Foundation, the Guggenheim Foundation, all the usual suspects, among many others, returns here with a riveting new collection. In the Miro Worm and the Mystery of Writing, which Claire Massoud calls at once exhilarating and revelatory, Birkerts reflects on fundamental questions every writer grapples with at one time or another. Quote, the old questions, the good questions, the Heideggerian questions that seem so very basic on the surface. But then you get caught in the implication and realize that they go on, and they only go crazy trying to answer them. And yet, trying to answer them, he does. We will see if he's gone crazy. Some of the questions are, what does it mean to be a writer today when so many other media compete for audiences? With the humanities seemingly everywhere in retreat, Birkerts probes the singular possibilities offered by a fixed text in a world dominated by social media. Meditating on everything from smartphones to photography, Borges to Dylan, Birkerts proves that the right words in the right order continue to offer readers a pathway through this labyrinth. Sven Birkerts.
Hello, everybody. Smartphone. Indeed, I need to. My last year or so, I've been a little bit visually challenged to the point where it would be hard for me to actually look at the small print in the printed page. So I've availed myself of this, which I thought would never come to pass, but it has. So I'll tell you what I'm going to read, even there. So the Miro Worm and the Mysteries of Writing. So the Miro Worm and the Mysteries of Writing is really essentially about all the different psychological and literal aspects of that state of mind and that action of putting words together. The piece I'm going to read goes back a step because it's not itself about writing, but it's very much, in a way, about the mood and the mindset that eventually generates writing. And I picked it because it has a particular seasonal relevance, about 3 weeks from now kind of relevance. And though it might have a little gloomy vibe to it, I offer it actually as a sort of, what's the phrase I had? A counter hex. So whatever I say here, I'm sort of reversing the hex. Let me take a drink of water and I'll be off. The piece is called Scratch. There's sometimes a story in the smallest thing. In the long unraveling scratch of a needle on vinyl, for instance. A sound once so common that we learned to hear right past it, brushing it off as a kind of audio lint, nothing to be bothered by. Until we got clean digital sound and started wondering how we had managed to enjoy our music as much as we had, all that fur on our pleasure. I'll go ahead and say then, piling a mountain of associations onto this near nothing of a base, that it was just that sound, that scratch, that reached me here in my state. Not to save me, nothing quite so dramatic, but certainly to wake me up to something. Not a big event as these things go, but on the other hand, I've thought of the moment with a tightening sense of connection, so it must mean something, especially since any taste of connection like that has been lacking for a while. I don't know how far back to go. Is this to be my presidential election piece, my cri de coeur, my confession of writerly disaffection? It just may be, but if it is, I'll try not to load the meanings on too thickly up front. My point is just that there was a bit of sound, but as soon as I heard it, I got that verifying pulse of alertness that I'm always hoping for. And I knew when the feeling ebbed back that it was, in fact, something bigger. To try to explain, to set out context, I'll need to push against my own strong, countering voice. Stop clearing your throat. Stop piling up those boring lists and explanations. And narrate to scale, local, domestic, trying to restore the mood of that particular afternoon as I drove to pick up my daughter. My usual late fall grimness, I certainly had it that day. The feeling that something was skewed in my basic relation to things, that the world I occupy, my version of life, had little or nothing to do with the world on the other side of my windshield. Just witness all those people blowing by me in their SUVs, bleating their business into cell phones. Who were they? I've been asking it for years, but now I felt more torque in the question. Were they the ones who blotted the little ballot balloons with their wrong-headed ink? Was it their fault? So yes, my sense of the outer world was certainly part of it. But at the same time, connected to this, I felt the clog of a personal murkiness. The anxious fear that I can't get said what I need to, and that even if I did know, my words would do no good at all. Not just my words, but words in general. I can't help it. When I get into these moods, no matter how I tilt my head, the whole proposition looks dicey. Everything pushes at me. The scatter and distraction of dailiness, the glut of our things, the fact that so few people seem to heed the things I care for, not just books, but the whole inward tending way of things. On these darker days, I'm absolutely convinced that the idiotic shimmer has taken over, crowding everything aside to the bright, slick thump of some studio-generated piece of feel-good music. This afternoon, then, my mood is dark and drained, infected by all this spleen, but also by the sudden inability to get my words right on the page, to feel that bright line of connection between thought and expression, pulling the self and the world back into balance. Trying to write about my sense of the culture post-election, I felt reduced to numb, angry generalizations and, as always happens, the difficulty of getting it right. Feels like a new permanent condition. On my way to pick up my daughter from school, inserted in the mindless dream flow of Route 128, I flipped through my CD case for a sound that might break against all this blandness. Music, my drug, can still work a spell on me at highway speeds. Something about the velocity and all that landscape slipping past meshes with the listening state, our looking turning into a kind of thought. And would I settle on finally figuring out my mood more through rejection? No, than choice, is a mix CD that a brotherly friend once burned for me. A bouquet of certified heartbreakers, folky classic songs I know I can often enough burrow my way into. And this time the music, the sequence does work. By the time I pull up the long school drive and park in my usual spot, I'm in a state with all my recent frustration and melancholy folded together. The election, my loss of connection, the writing morass, my sense that there are hungry new generations gnawing at our heels. And this state, created and fed by the music, keeps extending itself, somehow growing together with the November darkness that is closing down so swiftly, until finally all things inner and outer seem like part of one plaintive thing. And this, no denying, is the true bottom line picture of the world. But always, of course, we forget there has to be the moment of the turn, the shift, when even the cleanest sustained note wears out. This afternoon in my car in the dark, it comes in the deep quiet that follows the fading out of the song I was listening to. And right after, when I hear that tiny scritching sound, I know that my sentimental friend, and I know my sentimental friend, and I recognize the tune, the old British wartime classic, We'll Meet Again. Its crackly period piece. Sadness obviously transferred to CD from vinyl. And right here with that first bit of audio rustle, I'm transfixed, overtaken. Almost as if that tiny rasp, that staticky burr is the forgotten thing I've been in search of all along. And it hits me, if not quite with Proustian force, then still hard, jolting me up, giving me the end of something that can be pulled in or followed. And there at the other end, I know this right away before I even name it, is a very particular time and place. Ann Arbor, some 30 years ago, with everything in composite. All the little rooms I lived in, upstairs, all the inevitable slanted ceilings, jammed windows, battered wooden fire escapes. And I have such a strong feeling of those places, their look and their stale rankness, everything. My clothes, my posters, my notebooks and piles of papers, my books and my music. The source of it all, that first little stereo I owned that used to manufacture just this hiss I'm hearing. Hearing the sound on the ongoing hiss in the hours and hours of music, morning, afternoon, and night, the tone arm spiraling down slowly after the last cut of whatever record I have on, then flinging back with a salute to start again. Inside all of this in a jumble, I get the expanding sensation of everything else that was crowded around. Not just me, my room, my situation, but also my world, the times themselves. All that feeling we breathed and assumed, the us and the them. The cause so boldly marked, Nixon and the pigs here, the people there. All of it together bringing back the future we were pointing at without even knowing it. When we collected on the street or at the long tables at Mark's coffee shop or on the diag, when we knew without question that we were right and that we were next. the same feeling that incredibly, unthinkably disappeared, stunning us all, leaving us sucker punched and forced to figure out how to do whatever had to be done alone without that solidarity. All those dreamers waking up, everything inexplicably turning, changing, but not before leaving its traces. In the fine-grained details of atmosphere, in the songs, and for me, so I now discover, in the crackle I absorbed without noticing it, those endless few years when I lay on my bed, eyes closed, playing over and over my amplified scenarios of the life to come. Thank you.
From Bach to Lynn, where do we go next? But it's true, this idea of we meet again. When I look out at this audience, I do see the faces of so many old friends. And it's deeply moving. New friends, old friends, nice moment. And many of us actually do have old ties to Boston University, and I want to recognize that. Several of us hung out here, worked here over years. Yeah. Glyn Maxwell covers a greater distance in a single line than most people do in a poem. Quote Joseph Brodsky. One of England's most celebrated poets, described by James Wood as the major poet of his generation, Glyn Maxwell is the author of 10 volumes of poetry, along with numerous plays, essays, libretti, and fiction. Steeped in the tradition of English verse, with a mastery of its prosodic possibilities, Maxwell's verse sounds an utterly contemporary note. Over decades, Maxwell has honed a voice capable of the tenderest elegies and the sharpest political satire. Mercurial, playful one minute, sober as sunlight the next, Maxwell's poems surge on, sustained by urgent rhythms, their piercing intelligence modulated by an urbane wit. Quote, the other side took everything we knew is true and twisted it. And why they pull the shit they do, we cannot fathom, friend. It's why we're asking you. Actually, we're asking you, Glyn Maxwell.
How the hell are you? Christ, you haven't crossed my mind since all the shit we knew turned into shit we hoped was true. Forget it. Take my arm and tell me, how the hell are you? How the hell am I? Barely know these days, my friend. We get by. The nights are good. I don't know why. I do know why. Enough of this. Oh my man, don't cry. The sun shines on the square, whatever's next, whatever fool parading there. Let's be old fools with not a care, poor visitors from out of town who don't know this was where it all began again. Plaque there, where the thing kicked off. Here come the same young men in the same lines. Remember when never mind, hurrah, forever, glory be, amen, etc. Off they go, sunlight glancing off their gear. New world of years ago. You didn't hear me say that, though, because I never did. How does your bastard garden grow? Here's a howdy-do. Remember how this couldn't happen? given what we knew, those checks and balances and due process and fair play. Christ Jesus, wink an eye if you remember. I forget. It wasn't true. So why remember anyway? Let's let bygones be. I'm glad we met. It's nice to be reminded something isn't over yet. But I just mean you and me, out strolling in the square together, stopping here for tea. Two creatures with no history, who dreamed it would be otherwise, but who the hell were we? It's beyond delightful to be here in Boston again, at BU again, in the company of Uskold again, and also within the company of Uskold as well, and reading with the poet as extraordinary as Trudy and a critic as extraordinary as Sven. It's really quite a splendid and an honour. So those of you who don't know, I was Walcott student here. I can't get the number out. It's 37. I'm going to run up at this number. 37 years ago, and everything arises from that. Fall from then. He spent a while in heaven, insofar as back there nothing changes. What he made had form, so silence formed around it, made it also never change, till it was made of the same stuff heaven's made of, this stuff, that stuff. Satan light, I fall from then, into the realm of a green and tended garden, beside a trembling house, and I walk that garden, beaming like there'll always be the others, over the fence in all directions. Now I see on the clear blue sky a ball some neighbour's kid just booted over. I will stroll delightedly in the sun to throw it back to nobody, and the journey takes my lifetime. In the last couple of years, I was lucky enough to spend a little time at the T.S. Eliot House in Gloucester, up the coast. And one time I was there for 3 weeks, and as luck would have it, there was usually like 3 or 4, 5 other writers there in the house that Eliot lived in as a child and as a young man. And then for the last week, for the last few days, I was completely alone and trying to fending off ghosts and so on. And I thought a poem had to come of it, and this came of it. So it sort of addresses the absent and very present host in the house. I don't know how I got through that week, really. Drink primarily. Coyotes by the Eliot House. Tom, I have a question, and all I have is a question. There were lots of coyotes near this old house you lived in. I didn't expect them here in the green northeast. Figured them things of rocks and the high Sierras. There goes another one, bounding for the bushes. First time, I thought, that's a dog acting really strangely. But it didn't turn back for approval or get distracted by an insignificant thing, as a dog will tend to. No, it was gone by now. It had made me nervous. They're the size of a family dog, but they're on their own. Folks round here reassure me there's no danger unless you attack their cubs, so I'll shelve my plan to attack their cubs. Christ's sakes. Tom, apologies. I have loved my time in your house. Last night at dinner, we heard a siren wailing off in the town, and all of them started howling. All the coyotes from miles around, in the bushes, aghast, alerting their young, alarming their old, rising and heightening, matching its pitch and power, one near the blue spinning light, in its thrall uniquely, bound by this unpredicted visitation. Then after the siren faded, they packed it in. What do they think that is, that demands of them and gets of them their love, or their terror, or both? What do we poets do if we know it's nothing, not for them, or against them, or about them? Tom, I had to be here to ask that question. I expect I'll have to be gone before you answer. I always like when I'm visiting a foreign country, very familiar foreign country, to pay tribute to the current state of its public political discourse. The other side said things the other side would say, because they're them. They gathered here last Saturday, and good luck finding them. They've vans, they're miles away. The other side took everything we know is true and twisted it. And why they pull the shit they do, we cannot fathom, friend. It's why we're asking you. The other side must hate us. Why would anyone? We're angels. We mean well. We have a battle on. If they can't see our wings, all fucking hope is gone. The big old thing we serve has got its big old head in both its big old hands, and all the big old dead we've spoken to are down with what we've always said. The other side are lost. We'll do our level best to guide them, for unlike their kind are blessed by that same big old thing we serve. You know the rest. In case you don't, the song we sing, the prayer we pray, the flag we fly, the badge we sport, the hell to pay. Our fathers' fathers' fathers died to be this way. If life has nights enough to meet the other side, we'll wait that long. The pot is whistling. Get inside, my friend. If friend you are, I hope so. You decide. This is the oldest poem I'm reading in this evening. It's nearly 20 years old, and it just feels very contemporary to me in a strange way. I'm not, I'm not a. I mean, it's a humble example of what is most spectacularly comes to mind when you think of the end of Yeats's Second Coming, the rough beast slouching towards Bethlehem to be born, and I suppose this is on the spectrum of that in its own way, but it just seems to be about things that are happening, and I just came up with it. It's a sort of medieval fable, but it felt relevant at the time, and now it feels like it's come up to meet me again. It's called The Tinsel Man. What with the year we'd had, it was in the air to ditch that holiday, but the thing is old. It's always held, so it isn't up to us, and to be fair, the children like it. So we prized the coffin box, and the mouldy breeze was all our yesteryears, while on the road, by the wayside, the man himself was spotted, his big face not understanding. That days arrive as dates is not a thing he gets. So to be hoisted shoulder high, hip hip hooray, and to be crowned with tinsel in the morning sunshine was something. And we laughed into the town at the great fools we were again, and we took his weight in turns. We wrote new lines for age-old melodies. We banged the bells in our tradition. And he was fed before he had a chance to ask to be, and had his pick of girls, and was all smiles, but didn't pick, and they just stroked his hands as he stared at us. Who knows if he remembers this is what we do with him? Who knows if he believes the town behaves the same way every day? Gives a shit is another thing. And another thing is timing. It was noon. Then it was afternoon. And the white sky, so recently blue in his brain, was white. So he gripped his throne and with his language fought to stop it leaving him. His words were belted out so loud they made one sound, till that one sound meant nothing. He was focused on some clouds, then other clouds. Mime was all. We think what he meant was fight. They are everywhere. They are coming. But the sun blushed the maroon the girls had worn and was gone from there. It was night, and he didn't stop wailing till the dawn came and the sun rose. We leave him to his morning victory march to the near edge of the woods as he sheds his terrible old clothes and decorations. If you like your political verse more explicit, I'm very much your man. I wrote a kind of broadside a couple of years ago of really explicitly political poems aimed at the British government. I'd like to point out that we got shot of our government on July the 4th. And I'd like to also point out that November the 5th is, in my country, bonfire night. So it's just quite a curious coincidence I've noticed. So perhaps you can mirror what happened to us in some way. I started. I thought, why don't I kind of laid a lot of what's happened to England, specifically England, in the last 15 years or so, and further back. But they're all very contemporary disasters I write about in this book. Grenfell Tower, the migrants drowning in the Channel, the response to COVID, which was as bad as it was here, the response, the behaviour of the police in recent times, and in this case, the calamitous retreat from Kabul in summer of 21. So, but I started doing these poems in very, very familiar forms. These are the forms that are so familiar to an English ear that they're almost, you can't hear them anymore. So that, you know, the Tennysons and the Brownings and the Kiplings and the Elizabeth Barrett Browning and so on. Just really the really famous poems that get into Christmas anthologies of England's favourite poems. And of course, these are all the poems. These tend to be the poems. You have your own equivalents, I know. But these tend to be the poems that people who don't like poetry love. Yep, these tend to be the poems that people who really don't like it at all think are great. And of course, they're the poems that the class of people who've been running England for centuries like best. And I've had enough of this. So what I did here, by writing up these recent history in these forms, was to try and say, even the poems you like think you're disgraceful. And this is an example. This is called Burden, and it's based on Kipling's The White Man's Burden, which some of you maybe know was written by Kipling and sent to the Senate here, in Washington, as an exhortation to the government of the US to colonize the Philippines. That's why it was written. Anyway, and it has a refrain. So this has a refrain, although it's a different refrain. And in my poem, I've got four. You'll notice which four lines they are, but they're like the four lines where somehow Kipling's sentiment converges with mine. The only four lines that happens. So this is a description of the flight from Kabul, which I'm sure we all remember the footage of. And I've read quite deeply in this and the official inquiries and everything. And there's nothing here that didn't happen. For example, maybe less well known here, I'm sure that lots of it you remember, but is where all the government officials of England were on holiday and stayed on holiday when this was happening. And also the fact that Johnson's government flew out 200 cats and dogs in a plane otherwise empty when they left behind hundreds of translators and people who'd helped. And you know, as it's not irrelevant that the deal that made this possible was struck directly by the U.S. government with the president before last with the Taliban. So you know all this, I'm sure. Burden, after Rudyard Kipling. And in a room, there's this one, alone at work all day. The embassy is roasting. His endless emails say, "Help us, sir," from judges, translators, cleaning staff. Back home, his mates in Hampshire quote Kipling for a laugh. Soon it's a room for these ones, armed and in control, the drawers all battered open, and any hopeful soul who's penned an application to work with the UK should know it's being read now and run the fuck away. A dining room for these ones, in Somerset, in Crete, in the Dordogne. It's August, they're putting up their feet, they're staying on staycation, they're delegating calls in sandals by the plunge pool as a whole country falls. Will there be room for this one? Time slows. A tiny child is lifted over razor wire into the Western world. While far away on holiday, our leader leads the calls, denied but well attested, to save some animals. Will there be room for those ones? An Airbus leaves the ground. 200 seats are empty. Guess what's London bound? By all ye cry and whisper, by all ye leave and do, the silent sullen peoples shall weigh your gods and you. There was no room for this one. no room on earth at all, no room in heaven either. Time stops to watch him fall from help, from mercy, a spot on a blue sky. Pure is what his name meant. Sod your prayers, say I. In a room forever, these ones, with nowhere left to go, form half the population, nothing you don't know. Boys, you did your damnedest, the way you always do, and it's almost always murder, and almost always you. Never have met me, know me well. Tell all the world there was little to tell. Say I was heavenly, say I was hell. Harry me over the blasted moors, but come my way, go yours. Never have touched me, take me apart. Trundle me through my town in a cart. Figure me out with the aid of a chart. Finally add to the feeble applause, and come my way, go yours. Never have read me, look at me now. Get why I'm doing it, don't get how. Other way round, have a rest, have a row, have skirmishes with me, have wars. Oh, come my way, go yours. Never have left me, never come back. Mourn me in miniskirts, date me in black. Undress as I dress, when I unpack, pack. Yet pause for eternity on all fours. To come my way, go yours. Never have met me, never do. Never be mine, never even be you. Approach from a point it's impossible to, at a time you don't have. And by these bylaws, come my way, go yours. I'm going to finish with two poems to a family. The first is a sonnet. I mean, it actually is a sonnet. My students always say, I've written a sonnet. And no, you've just written something that's got 14 lines. But you know, and that's not necessarily an achievement to have made it be 14 lines. You know. But this sort of is. This is for my daughter, Alfreda, or Alfie, as I call her. And it's really simply it's a sort of invocation to slow time down for her, to slow time down. It's mentioned in the poem that she's 20, and as an indication of how well that attempt has gone, she's now 27, and her granddaughter's 4. So that went well. Anyway, here was an attempt I made. It's called The Ledge. For Alfie. Woken again by nothing, with this line already at my back. I thought of you at 20, as you are, which passed somehow while I was staring. Thought how yesterday you said you wanted to be young again, which left me with this nothing left to say that's woken me. You are. What else does father wail to child? Though wailing it, he's woken with 6/7 of the night to go. You are. Look, I will set to work this very moment, slowing time myself, feet to the stone and shoulder to the dark, to gain new ground. If just one ledge of light you flutter to, right now, rereading that. Thank you so much, Askold, and everyone at Arrowsmith for putting this together. It's a joy to be here and read with you guys. This is an elegy to my father, who passed away in 2016. I knew I wanted to write a poem, but it took me quite a long time, years to work out how to write something. And finally, this is also quite seasonal and timely in a nicer way than the obvious passing of recent things. It's about the hours going back and forward in the October and March, which is what it is for us, or April, I can't remember. Daylight saving. Every time the daylight saving comes around, twice in the year, there's always a sort of movement to stop it, to say we don't want daylight saving. The postmen don't like it, and the businessmen do like it, or something. And the farmers are keen, and everyone's sort of just going to do away with it. And I always think, please don't do away with it, because I always think it's beautiful, really beautiful. And thinking of the evening suddenly being light, or the afternoon suddenly being dark, made me think of my dad some reason. So I thought this is the little door that's opened, and I'll write this about him. Sib was a sort of name we called him, sort of pet name for him. And there's a reference near the end to voting, and the year is the year he passed away was 2016, which is when we in the UK had what I regarded as a truly catastrophic vote, and a victory for darkness, which in the dance that our two countries had, you then repeated 6 months later. So it was quite a year. Anyway, thank you again. Daylight saving in memory of Jim Maxwell, 1928 to 2016. Sid, they're considering doing away with daylight saving. I wanted to tell you, in one of the fora we wander together, neither one literally here. Anyway, I don't know the reason. The folks of the morning and folks of the evening met at a table and at the same moment rose in agreement, doing away with daylight saving. And nor was I there to say, hold your horses, as you would have said, and so would your father. We three in a line, having doubts at the same time, wasn't to be. No one sat in our places. No one spoke up for the scent of the hedges, our marathon hide and seek going on, when the sun should be set, and we shouldn't be out, and the ribbon of light down the curtains for ages, infinite really, in that there's no ending, anyone's showed me. No one spoke up for the thrill of the way the last shreds of a Sunday clung at the gate like their father was coming to ferry them home. All gone if you look, but no one is looking. No, Sib, they are thinking of doing away with daylight saving. Won't miss the beetling advance of the dark on your boys standing up in our bikes, heading home. They won't miss the witches just missing the trees when it's not even 5. For whatever they save, they will lose as they do. It's not going to be time. Who knows why they had daylight saving at all? I'm just glad we had it. I'm sure you explained. You're explaining now. And I'm listening how I have generally listened and always will, for the love in a sound. They are doing away with daylight saving. And where shall we meet? Now God, I don't think so, is shutting those windows and locking the house like a yesterday. We shall meet where the light and the clock are askew, and the language has scrambled to say what that's like, and it's thinking it might let the space play the light, and it might let the space play the other thing too, what was it called? 2 hands in a ring, and one pointed to there, and one pointed to there. There was its point. Who knows where it went? Howls the language again, and goes back to its darning. As back to St. Francis we go, you and I, where we voted that second last time you went out. Won't say how that went. There'll be time better spent, and light better shed to go wandering by. Thank you.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you to our readers, and thank you all for coming to the reading tonight. As Osgold mentioned earlier, we have chosen a winner for 2024's Derek Walcott Prize, and I'm just going to officially announce it here once I get my notes ready. So the Walcott Prize winner for this year goes to Italian poet Antonella Aneda for her book, Historia. Aneda can take an insect and make its short life beautiful, and she takes the entire treacherous cosmos into her quiet home. Faced with the hyperbole of things I try to prepare myself, I go down into their chasm, she writes. She has an efficient style, rereading Tacitus in the Summer of Massacres, and writes riveting poems about her dying mother, for which alone she deserves this prize. When her mother goes swimming for the last time, The earth is on to her demise, moving its sounds around, mixing her in. On her ankles, dark red seaweed. History itself is a noisy character, reminding us our days are measured, and to measure our days. Every 7 years, we replace ourselves. Now we're not who we were not. All while Aneda is calculating the geometry of her surroundings. What is the measure of a life, she is asking, a theme from Dante's Commedia. She takes in the continuity and churn of exile, a colonial pain, from antiquity to Europe's refugee crisis today. Drownings a few meters from these sunny coasts, while she washes dishes. She tends to the living, showing us with sobering efficiency that there is no exile as profound as losing a parent. I enter with my mother. I enter with my mother into death. She is scared. She talks about hemlock and the Stoics, but terror consumes her, and finally, so I lie down next to her in her bed. As she dies, I wait for her scent to end. I just want to extend my thanks again to our authors and to all of you for coming tonight. Please show support for these authors and past Arrowsmith authors by purchasing books that are available on the table over there. So please feel free to peruse. We'll have the credit card machine ready, but appreciate any form of payment. So yes.
Sign me.
Oh yes, of course. And the authors will be signing their books. I think we're going to set up over here. So just give us a moment and.
No, I think over there, Jake.
Oh, over there? Okay.
The reception.
Okay.
The reception here.
Okay, so we're going to get organized, and we will be over there selling books immediately, and the authors will be situated as well. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.